either one way or another. So there's, well, let me put it this way: the opposite of a choice is a mandate.
Right.
You know, God did not have a mandate,
Right.
but because God loved us before we knew Him, He decided to make a choice. And now that we are here today, you know, in our modern world, it's the same. It's not a mandate, it's a choice. And God would want us to move our hearts towards that choice.
Yep. Yep. And so this is contrary to the idea that people have been selected before the foundation of the world, beforehand, before they were born, to be saved or lost. This is the idea that, as Janice so well put it, that He chose us because we chose Him, and we are chosen. You did it way better than I did. So, but this is the idea here, right? We are chosen because He says this is the family. You can come in it or not. In the same way as that Noah built an ark, and he said the ones that are on the ark will be the ones that will be saved. And that's how He chose Noah and his family, because they chose to get on the ark. And everyone else, by default, they chose not to. Sarah.
So He's the chief cornerstone, and we lay down our lives as living stones on that foundation. That's us committing to Him,
Right.
because He first committed to us.
Yes, very good. And I think that if we're going along this idea of workers, that these are priests doing these priestly duties, and they're the ones continually laying the building, right? This ever-growing building of Christians, of priesthood. So this idea of generation or race or people is kin. This is family. This is what this word means. And so we're added to the family here, and we're offspring. And so we are a chosen generation, a royal priesthood. In what way are we royalty? Elon.
Unlike in the Old Testament, we do not have an intermediary to get to God. We can go directly, and as a member of His kingdom, we join Him in His work to unite man and God.
Yes, very well put. Aaron.
1 John chapter 3, behold what manner of love the Father hath bestowed upon us, that we should be called the sons of God. Well, the sons of the Most High is the Prince, and Jesus Christ is the Prince of Peace. And we will eventually be elevated to that.
Right. And go ahead, Gene.
We are His heirs, and that brings us to be royal.
That's right.
We inherited that.
Right. We know who the king is.
Yeah.
Sarah.
Well, the job of the priests was to make sacrifices, and this passage says that we are chosen to offer up spiritual sacrifices that are acceptable. So there's passages in the New Testament that talk about our modern sacrifices, which are hands that do good, lips that give praise, or lips that give thanks, and words of praise to God. Those are our sacrifices.
Right.
The opposite would be what some people in the Old Testament offered up sacrifices that were unacceptable. So we have to be very careful with our words if they're not praiseworthy, our thoughts if we're not thinking of what is pure, right, and good and lovely,
Right.
and with our mouths.
I think a lot of times in the Old Testament it seems to be easier because it's very obvious if the sacrifice was acceptable or not. It's like there's no spots on this lamb. It's a male. It's for the firstborn. Whatever the requirements were, it's very obvious. Today, in our spiritual nature, it's much less obvious. As Sarah's saying, we can easily start off well with the fruit of our lips and then botch it somewhere very quickly if we're not careful. And so we have to be extra diligent about that, certainly. See?
The whole idea of something being royal implies So, and but you got verse 6 there, and I think verse 5 is important too, because he says, if you will indeed obey my voice and keep my covenant, then you shall be my own possession among all the peoples, for all the earth is mine. And so there's a condition to being of the kingdom of priests, and that is related to obedience, obedience to what God said.
Exactly. And I'm glad you bring this up. All of this is conditional, and there's no part in here, if you're reading what Peter's saying, that makes it seem unconditional. And so there are things that we have to do, that we have to meet, conditions to meet for salvation. And it's obedience. We see this, and it's through the Word. And so, as Steve said, pointed out, this is from Exodus 19 here, where it's talking about a kingdom of priests, and we are a holy nation. And as the Hebrew writer will so aptly put it, that we are not under the same law, the same scheme as the Old Testament people, that we have a new king and a new priest under a different priesthood, under a different kingship, and it's not under the law of Moses or the Aaronic lineage. It is of Melchizedek. It is who is a priest and a king. And so this is how we have this dual role that he possesses here, and which makes us royal priests, and which wasn't something that necessarily happened in the Old Testament. That the kings and the priests usually did not come from the same lines. And so, but we do have this holy nation also. And so we've talked about this word holy many times. This means set apart for a special purpose. It is we are dedicated for a sacred purpose as God's people, as the subjects, as Steve put. So what's that purpose?
To unite man and God. To represent God.
To represent God? Okay, yes, this is
bring
it.
them to him.
This is exactly what he is about to start saying right here, right? That we are to be for his own special purpose, a holy nation, and I guess that's exactly what that means there, his own special purpose. And so this, some translations will say God's own possession, and so this carries this idea of a special and intimate purpose that we have, and it's in a sense like no other. That this is cited from Deuteronomy chapter 7 and Malachi chapter 3. Here, for you are holy people to the Lord your God. The Lord your God has chosen you to be a people for himself, a special treasure above all peoples on the face of the earth. And then he refers to those people as his jewels here in Malachi. They shall be mine, says the Lord of hosts. On that day I make them my jewels, and I will spare them as a man spares his own son who serves him. And so this is the idea we're talking about here. He has called us into his group, his own people, his own family. And we are for a special purpose here. And we rejoice in this, that we are the special acquired treasure of God, precious jewels, which he proposes to keep for himself, for his own purposes. And so this is one of those occasions that we can be joyous about, that we are part of those treasures. I think of my kids when they were young, they would collect those little trinkets. They would just be little things that they take a liking to, and they will guard them with their life, and they'll just collect them all, and they'll have them stored somewhere, and no one else can play with them. They're their own special possessions. And this is kind of how God is with us, but it's even more forceful because we have a mission. We're not just cute little trinkets or toys, but we have a mission. And this is what he's getting into next, as Meemaw said, that we are to convince people and live a certain way. And so we're talking about these descriptive titles here, these roles, a holy nation, a royal priesthood, and these things. But now we're going to get into some actions here. And this is the purpose: to proclaim, proclaim the praises of him who called you out of darkness into his marvelous light. And so this word proclaim here literally means to show forth or to publish abroad. And it shows our obligation to give wide publicity of the excellences in the generous nature of God and his plan of salvation. And so why is this description out of darkness so fitting here for what Peter is explaining?
So what was the question again?
Why is he using this description out of darkness into light? Why is it so fitting here?
Out of sin.
Out of sin?
And to save it.
Okay.
Into-
Right. Did you have a thought, Steve? Or
Well, yeah, along that same line, that is a consistent theme throughout the New Testament. Contrasting unrighteousness with righteousness. You know, that this is the dark versus the light. You know, and this whole idea that it is him who called us out of darkness and into his marvelous light. I think of course harkens back to Colossians chapter 1 verse 13, you know, where it says that he had rescued us from the domain of darkness and has transferred us to the kingdom of his beloved Son. Because of course the kingdom that it's within the kingdom that the light of righteousness will be found, and we have been pulled out of darkness,
right,
you know, into his kingdom, into his light.
right, exactly, and we can see how this can apply to both Jew and Gentile here. These Christians who are scattered abroad, and I can see certainly how the Gentile Christians who would be in complete ignorance of the things of the Jewish history, customs, the lineage, all these things, but they would be brought into this, illuminated in a sense, and as well as the Jewish ones, we'll be talking about just sin here, and how the life of sin is considered darkness. Because as Steve said, that this is a continual theme throughout the entire New Testament, about how Jesus is the light, and that we are lights. Jesus is the chief cornerstone, and we are living stones. And so we have these correlations here. And so, into his marvelous light, we see that Christians are often called lights, and that we are beacons, and we are to be dispelling the darkness in that sense. And so, what are some ways that we were called out of that darkness? Lisa?
Being baptized, coming into your salvation, hearing the word, and obeying it. That's
Sure.
how we come out. Walk in the light as Jesus is in the light.
Right, exactly. And so we're like we said, obeying the gospel, being penitent, turning from that life of habitual sin, and committing ourselves to the Lord, committing ourselves to the conduct that is worthy of a Christian. Yes.
It makes me think that our value does not come from anything in this world, our family, our career, our success, our wealth, but all our value comes from God and what he does, not what we do.
Yes. And this is what Peter's saying in the first chapter when he's saying that, hey, you've been bought with something that money can't buy, the blood of Jesus. And the reason is because we are so valuable. And this is why we as Christians are to take our love farther than just brotherly love. That we should be loving people in the sense that Meemaw just described. Because God has made us intrinsically so valuable because of what he did. And that we should be approaching people like that. Rather than, oh, I don't like this person because of that, or having different ideas in this negative way. So, any other thoughts of verse 9 before I move on? Yes.
I just that his marvelous light is not just a light, it's like a magnificent light, a marvelous light, a pure light. When I think about marvelous, I think about the purest of gold, the purest of
and this is the same idea, I think, as what he's saying, that we are lights to his marvelous light, as we are living stones to the chief cornerstone. That it is, he's much more superior, and that we have the qualities because of him. That we have the qualities of being a living stone that's been transferred to us because of the living stone. We have the quality of being light because he is the light, certainly. And so in here in verse 10, oh, sorry, go ahead, James.
I wanted to also speak on marvelous light. I think this marvelous light is the promise, what he's given us, all of his blessings, his mercies, his grace, and knowing that all of this is from him, and we have that promise of where we're going to be. That's
Right.
what's marvelous.
Marvelous. Yes, certainly. Any other thoughts? Okay, so verse 10 here, who once were not a people, but now are the people of God, who had not obtained mercy, but now have obtained mercy. And so this is quoting from Hosea, and Paul quotes this in Romans chapter 9 also. And he says in Hosea, I will call them my people, who are not my people, and her beloved, who is not beloved. And it shall come to pass in the place where it said to them, you are not my people, and they shall be called sons of the living God. And this is from Hosea chapter 2. And so, how could this apply to Gentile Christians specifically? Eric?
Well, the largest contrast is, in comparing and contrasting the Jew with the Gentile, the way you became a Jew is on the 8th day you were circumcised. You opened your class with a choice. So what choice does an 8-day-old person have?
Yeah.
They're not capable of making that choice. So a Jew became a Jew and a leader of a Jewish household on the 8th day by circumcision. Well, that's really not a choice at all. Gentiles, in their adulthood, have been given a choice, just as we have been given a choice. And that is a choice that we make to follow God. And speaking of light, on the previous verse, a lot that goes with that is enlightenment.
Yes.
And the only way we get that is through the Word of God.
Right. And it's not necessarily, when we're looking at light and darkness, we're talking about this in a metaphorical sense. So we're talking about ignorance and
Right.
knowledge.
Right.
So the revealing of this is what's so marvelous about this light. And that's what it dispels the darkness. Excuse me. And so I can see here this being especially pertinent to these Gentile Christians who are reading this, who haven't had, they come from all sorts of different backgrounds, different cultures and customs, whereas the Jewish nation, they're already familiar with a lot of these things. They're familiar with the priesthood, they're familiar with the Old Testament way of doing things, sacrifices, so it was a smoother transition for them in a lot of ways. And for these Gentile Christians, it was just through the obedience of the Word, right? They are called into this marvelous light, and they respond by becoming a people. And the way they did this was through the obedience. And so they were essentially naturalized citizens here. And so we saw a lot of this while we were watching the Olympics over the last couple of weeks, that there was a lot of people from different countries competing in. As another country, they would have to go through this whole naturalization process to do it. And we have now common things. We have common nation, we have common interests, common obligations, and common government with the common king. And so, let me get back to verse 10 here. And so now, before they were not a people, and now they are a people. Before, they had no mercy, and now they have. Go ahead, Janice.
And before, just as Eric was saying, but they were born, the Jews, they were born into the nation of
Right.
Israel. And the Gentiles, now none of that now.
Right.
Where it used to be, the Gentiles, I think they could be proselytized or something like that, but there was still kind of like a hierarchy,
Yep.
but not anymore.
Exactly. That barrier, that partition has been broken down through Jesus, certainly. And and so this word mercy here means unpity, and so they have obtained this. They are not to be pitied any longer. So it indicates that it was a single act with a definite time, which I think this could refer to the act that Jesus he sacrificed himself once for all, or on an individual basis when we obey the gospel. That it's a once for all kind of thing, that we have obtained this mercy. And so we were once objects of hostility, of wrath toward God. We were at enmity with him, and now we are objects of compassion and pity toward him, or toward him through us. And so why? Why have we obtained this mercy? Okay? Because of the Son, I was about to say, that's happened in our obedience, right? And so again, we have this idea that there is something that we must do conditionally to obtain this mercy. God is compassionate, he is merciful, he is patient, but we have to meet the terms to receive that, to obtain that. Go ahead, Ewell.
Going a little further, God could give us this mercy because his Son died on the cross and made it possible.
Yes. And without that, we would have no mercy. We would have no mercy. We would have no ability to become lights. We would just be in the darkness. And so, moving from...
He overcame death.
Right. And so here we're getting into another section. So we're moving from this encouragement to be faithful in our duties to shifting to this new section of the letter where he's talking about getting back to the initial point. I find Peter and Paul very similar in this, that they'll start something and they'll get off on this tangent and then they'll come back to their original point. And so here we have Peter going back to 1 Peter 1:1. And he's bringing us back to this idea. Okay, we're pilgrims, we're sojourners again. And so he says, Beloved, I beg you as sojourners and pilgrims, abstain from fleshly lusts which war against the soul, having your conduct honorable among the Gentiles, that when they speak against you as evildoers, they may, by your good works, which they observe, glorify God in the day of visitation. And so, to this point here that Peter is talking about, we're pilgrims and we're sojourners, he's stressing this way of living that we have to take on, so that in view of the relationship that we have with God. Since we have this relationship, this special relationship with God, we need to act in a certain way. And we are pilgrims and we are sojourners in this. And so he's encouraging us to walk worthily and godly before unbelievers, even in the midst of our persecution. And so he begins this section here with the term of endearment, beloved. This is very common. We see this in many, many places in the scriptures. A lot of Paul's writings will have this. John refers to his readers as beloved as well. And this just reveals the warm affection that Peter has toward these brethren and toward these readers here. And his goodwill on their behalf and close relationship he sustains towards them. And so as sojourners, he's saying that they are to abstain from these fleshly lusts. And he says, I beg you. What kind of idea do we have here that he's entreating them with? Beloved, I beg you. How do you think he views these individuals that he's writing to? Yes, and so he's this has a tender nature to it, and so he's kind of shifting this. It has this real tender tone to it now, and so this word beg, also translated beseech in some, call to one side, tenderly admonish or entreat, And so, again, this shows that he wants them to understand, hey, you guys are very valuable to me, very important to me. And so, why are they called pilgrims and sojourners? We talked about this a little bit a few weeks ago, but he's using two different words here at this time. So why are they called pilgrims and sojourners? Why are we pilgrims and sojourners? We should look at ourselves as that. Lisa?
Because we're not supposed to be of the world. We're not of the world, we're different.
Right.
Right?
Right. We're foreigners here, living in a land that's on foreign soil, certainly. Sir.
In the NIV, just like the words you just brought up, it mentions foreigners and exiles, and when we get baptized, we need to separate ourselves from our old life.
Yep.
And so a lot of people will hear from friends or other people that they knew in their old life as, you've changed, you're foreign to me, I don't understand. And we need to exile ourselves from the world because God has just put us here to live, to be an example, to reach the lost, and to find our way to heaven. And so we need to exile ourselves from that worldly mindset and have, like we were talking about earlier, the spiritual mindset.
Exactly. And go ahead, Jane.
And I would say he's using the word pilgrims and sojourners, especially sojourners, is that we're not here to stay.
Yep.
We're going to move on.
Temporary.
We're temporary.
I was thinking of it along the lines of if you go somewhere working on a work visa, you go to another country, you have a work visa, it's only going to last for a certain amount of time. You're there doing your job, you're there to live, but you're going back home. You can't stay. And because of this, we also have all the privileges and the benefits of being in this country, but we still have all the rights from back where we're from. And so here we're citizens of what kingdom? The kingdom of heaven. And so even though we're here, we still have the privileges, we still have the rights and all the things that we have from our home country. Janice.
And being sojourners and pilgrims, to use your example of, we're here, we're working, but we're not of this place. He's saying, you're not of this place, so don't get entangled with a lot of stuff that's going to mess with your soul.
Right.
These fleshly lusts, we're in a battle. You're warring against your soul. Don't get involved with that because you're a pilgrim and you're a sojourner. You won't be here long.
Don't get distracted.
Right.
Right. Very good. Did you have something else?
Just agreeing with what Janice said, because we want to go home.
That's right. That's
I
right.
mean, these things will keep us from going home.
Yeah. Yes. And we have to make sure that we stay mindful of that we're only here for a specific purpose, and that we are here to do the work and then head back home. Right? Very good. And so we'll go ahead and end here this morning. Is there any other thoughts before we close out? We'll finish up this section, Lord willing, next week. All right. Thank you so much for your participation and your attention.
Yeah, it's nice and warm. I'm liking it. I'm probably going to visit more often. I don't know if I'm going to move here officially. Just to see how it goes. But I'm no, but it's really nice.
I'm so glad you finally made it. She's been teasing me for a year now that you were going to come and visit.
Well, I just finished my last therapy treatment like 3 months ago.
Well, good. Well, I'm so glad you finally made it out and put a face with the name.
It's good to be here.
How was it? Emotional, short, too short. A little bit. Yeah, I told Steve, I said, I'm so happy you came, but if you didn't come, I don't think I was coming home right away. I was just going to say I'm tired of this room. kinda nice having that little oasis retired
Yes.
where, you know, I can make banana bread and I'm good. There's no other responsibility.
That's what I thought we should have.
Yes, sir.
Well, that was what she asked me about, because we got there to teach it all. It's like, look, you're bored, you